Easton Thompson had everything: money, power, influence, everything except a family. But nothing prepared him for the night he discovered he was the father of two 4-year-old girls, and that he'd missed every single day of their lives without ever knowing. He wasn't in a hospital. It wasn't some jaw-dropping boardroom scandal. He was simply exhausted, driving down a rural road when his GPS rerouted him to a diner the world had forgotten. And the moment he stepped inside, he saw two little girls sitting on a makeshift bench, sharing a broken-colored pencil. Two tiny girls with the exact same eyes as his. The waitress who poured his coffee, a young woman named Daisy, was the woman he had loved for one single night years ago. The woman who vanished from his life. The woman who was now raising his daughters alone. She didn't tell him. She didn't ask for help. She didn't wait for him. And the truth is, she had very strong reasons. How does a man this powerful survive hearing that he failed his own daughters without even knowing they existed? And how does a mother who fought alone for 4 years learn to trust again? This is their story. Welcome to Hearts Rewritten, my dear family. If this is your first time here, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and subscribe to become part of our little corner of stories. Today's story is an emotional roller coaster, so take a deep breath, because it starts now. The lonely roadside diner looked like it had been forgotten by time, a small refuge wedged between silent fields and miles of empty highway. The neon sign, half broken and half stubborn, blinked in pinkish tones that reflected in puddles left behind by a brief summer rain. A place that stayed empty most nights was now waiting for the visitor, who would change everything. Almost no one drove by. It was an accidental detour, an alternate route that only appeared for people who needed it, or were about to discover they did. And that night, fate chose to cross that point on the road with a man who carried power on his shoulders and exhaustion in his eyes. Easton Thompson, CEO of an international real estate empire still in rapid growth, always looked out of place anywhere that didn't mirror luxury. When he stepped out of his car, an elegant vehicle polished, gleaming even under the weak light, he looked like an intruder. He was used to 5-star restaurants, sophisticated hotel lounges, and the glossy floors of corporate meeting rooms. Gravel under his boots, the smell of damp earth, the silence of the surrounding fields. Everything clashed with his world of marble, steel, and mirrored glass. On any other day, he would have laughed at the idea of walking into a place like that. But that night, something inside him needed air. A pause, silence, and the diner's warm glow served as a lighthouse for a man on the edge of burnout. The scent slipping through the cracked open windows, onions caramelizing, burgers sizzling on the griddle, fresh coffee, mixed with the smell of wet corn drifting in from the distant fields. Easton breathed in slowly, but even breathing felt like work after so many hours of video calls, meetings, pressure, and decisions that could shift the lives of hundreds of people. In his meticulously planned life, this trip out to the countryside was supposed to be nothing more than a quick drive through the neighboring county to assess potential land for a new commercial project the company was interested in. Just another task, another target, another item crossed off an endless list. But then came the phone call that wrecked everything. A missing business partner, important documents gone, a storm of worries, and a GPS mistake that pushed him straight to that lost point on the map. When he pushed open the glass door, the bell announced his entrance and drew a few curious glances. An elderly couple smiled quietly. A trucker wiped greasy hands on his jeans and went back to eating. A young mother rocked a fussy baby. No one seemed impressed by the big city man, too expensive for that rustic little room. Easton sat near the window, set aside a phone loaded with relentless notifications, and took a deep breath. The old jukebox let a soft country song spill into the air, as if it was trying to calm anyone who walked in carrying the world on their back. He almost closed his eyes when a gentle voice approached. "Good evening. What can I get you tonight?" When he lifted his gaze, time seemed to falter. The young woman in front of him had sun-warmed skin, maybe just over 20. Warm brown eyes and hair pulled into a simple ponytail, a few strands slipping loose along the side of her face. The little name tag on her apron read, Daisy. But it wasn't her beauty that shook him. It was something in her eyes, an expression he recognized, quiet strength, contained exhaustion, and real kindness, something that pierced the armor he wore every day. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control. "I'll have black coffee, and a menu, please." Daisy smiled, small but sincere. "Of course, you can order anything. Our apple pie is kind of famous around here." She was walking away when two tiny figures appeared behind the counter. Two girls, identical as reflections, 3, maybe 4 years old, with light brown hair tied into messy little pigtails. Simple dresses, patterned socks. One of them ran to Daisy and held onto her apron, shy. The other moved forward with curiosity, stepping lightly, as if the floor was a secret she was learning to decode. "Not right now, my loves," Daisy murmured, bending to guide them back toward the kitchen. Easton watched the scene without knowing why, but he did know something about it mattered. Then the girl who had stepped forward turned her face and looked at him, and Easton's universe stopped. Her eyes, green-brown, expressive, were two mirrors of a childhood he tried to forget. The same shape, the same curious spark, the same left cheek dimple that appeared when she fought a smile. And both girls, they looked like him. His heart stuttered for a second. No, it couldn't be. Impossible. Kids who resembled someone existed. Genetic coincidences happened. It was irrational to think that, but his pulse raced like it was trying to confess a secret. When Daisy returned with his coffee, she noticed his stare fixed on the kitchen door. A faint blush rose to her cheeks. "Sorry," she said softly. "I know it's not ideal to bring my daughters to work. I tried to find a solution, but my neighbor had an emergency today, and it's been hard." Easton lifted a hand, trying to sound calm while chaos burned inside him. "You don't have to apologize. Kids are kids, and you're doing your best." She smiled, relieved. "Thank you for understanding. What else can I get you?" "A burger," he said. "Whatever you recommend. And the apple pie." She wrote it down and started to step away when he let the forbidden question slip out. "The twins. How old are they?" Daisy hesitated, weighing whether it was invasive, but she answered, 4. "They turned 4 last month. 4. The number hit him like a blow. If they were 4, then 4 years ago. Images flashed like arrows. His father's funeral. Months of grief. Entire days buried in work. Short relationships. Forgettable. Used only to numb the pain. And then, something sharp. A blurry memory. A night lost to time. Easton wasn't the kind of man who let the past touch him. After the death of the only father who had ever truly loved him, he'd built walls around his emotions, and everything that even hinted at attachment was avoided with surgical precision. But now, something inside him was trembling. The simple thought, absurd, impossible, that those little girls could be connected to him set off an instinctive alarm. One he didn't want, but couldn't silence. Daisy cleared her throat at the edge of the table, trying to sound normal. "They can be a handful sometimes," she murmured, eyes dropping to her order pad. "I'll be right back with your food." And she disappeared through the door that led to the kitchen. Alone again, Easton pressed his fingers to his forehead and took a deep breath. Maybe he was overreacting. Maybe exhaustion was messing with his perception. Maybe he was seeing patterns where there were none. But the anxiety burned in his chest. He took a sip of coffee, his hands shaking slightly, and stared at the phone on the table. Missed calls from the CFO, messages from investors, alerts about the multi-million-dollar acquisition. All the things that normally devoured his attention now felt distant, irrelevant. In the dark screen, his reflection stared back at him. Deep, striking, hazel-brown eyes. The same eyes that had looked at him with curiosity minutes ago. Thunder rattled the windows. The lights flickered. Outside, the bright sign wavered, as if it shared the same imbalance twisting inside him. If Emma and Everly were really his, what would that mean? For Daisy, for his career, for the empire he'd built precisely so he'd never have to depend on anyone. His food arrived, but he barely tasted it. He chewed mechanically while his mind spun without mercy, until one of the girls appeared again. The one in the blue overalls, Everly, hugging a stuffed puppy tight to her chest. She stopped right in front of him, just looked at him, didn't say a word. And in that look, there was recognition. Or maybe it was only his desperate hunger for answers, turning everything into a sign. Daisy rushed over to get her, apologizing with her eyes as if she was afraid of offending someone far too important. Easton simply waved it off, but inside, he was falling apart. When Everly turned, the light revealed a tiny dimple on her left cheek, the same one he'd inherited from his father, the same one that always gave him away whenever he tried to hide a smile. And right then, his control finally cracked. He needed to talk to Daisy. He needed to settle this. He couldn't leave that diner without knowing whether he was about to discover 2 daughters, 2 entire lives he'd never even known existed. The rain thickened, hammering the roof. Customers murmured. Forks clinked against plates. Country music tangled with the sound of wind. Nothing felt real. Easton stood, and he pushed through the swinging kitchen door, off limits to customers, driven by something bigger than caution. The kitchen was alive with heat. Pans hissed. Steam rose in waves. Daisy stood by a pie, a knife in her hand. When she saw him, she startled. "Sir, I'm so sorry," she stammered, dropping the knife like she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Was the food bad? I can bring you something else." Guilt hit Easton hard. He didn't want to scare her, least of all put her job at risk. Before he could answer, the cook, a broad man in a striped apron, cleared his throat. "Go on, Daisy, I've got this," he said. "Just don't start any trouble." With that quiet permission, Daisy motioned for Easton to follow her. They walked to a narrow hallway lit by a fluorescent bulb that was practically dying, flickering like it was keeping time with her racing heart. Shelves stacked with supplies and boxes made the space tight, almost claustrophobic. Daisy leaned back against the wall, arms crossed in a defensive posture. "What do you need?" she asked in a firm whisper, steady but vulnerable. Easton took a breath. "This is going to sound strange," he began, "but I need to ask you about your daughters." Her expression shut down instantly. He tried to be careful. "They look like me. The eyes, the dimple. It's a very rare trait in my family." The shock that flashed through Daisy's eyes was real, immediate, unwanted, but real. And then it was replaced by resistance. "You can't be implying that," she murmured, tense. Easton lifted both hands in a peace offering. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I just need to know, have we met before? Ever? Somehow?" Her cheeks flushed. Her eyes darted away like she was trying to run from a memory. "No," she finally whispered. "I don't even know your name." "Easton Thompson," he said. A flicker of recognition cut across her face like lightning. Then she retreated emotionally, hiding everything. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but you're mistaken," she said, too controlled. "The girls don't have a father in their lives. I'm raising them alone." The sentence sounded rehearsed, guarded, painful. Easton tried to step closer. "They're 4 and that's none of your business," she snapped, her voice shaking. The narrow hallway seemed to shrink even more. Truths were trapped in there, suffocating between walls and old wounds. For a moment, the courage she'd been hiding wavered. Her eyes glistened with something between fear and exhaustion, but she pulled herself together. "I appreciate you being here, Mr. Thompson," she said, voice quieter now. "But I need you to respect my privacy. I really need this job." He felt the blow. He couldn't push her harder. "Not there. Not like that." "Okay," he murmured, stepping back. "I'll drop it. For now." The tension in her body eased slightly, but something invisible stayed lodged between them, an unspoken truth, throbbing. Daisy returned to the dining room with quick steps. Easton stayed in the hallway for a moment, dragging a hand through his hair, trying to put his thoughts back in order. He'd never felt so vulnerable, so out of control in his entire life. When he returned to the booth, he noticed the burger had gone cold, barely touched. His appetite was completely gone. Outside, the storm kept building. Lightning lit up the windows. The neon sign trembled like it was about to die. Inside, customers went on with their lives as if nothing was happening. A couple argued quietly. A trucker flipped through a newspaper. 2 guys laughed at something on a phone. But the only thing Easton could see was Daisy, moving fast, keeping her polite smile, avoiding any closeness with the girls. She was hiding something, and that terrified him more than any multi-million-dollar negotiation ever had. He tried to find answers online, searching the diner, the town, the place name, anything that might lead to Daisy or her daughters. Nothing. Just old reviews about the food. Not a single mention of a young woman raising twins alone. He knew nothing about her life, about what she'd faced, about what she was trying to protect. And it hit him like a punch. 4 years, constant travel, lost nights, forgotten faces, a stretch of his life he'd erased just to survive grief. Had he left Daisy behind without even knowing? His phone buzzed. A message from the CFO. "Easton, investor meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Are you back yet? Where are you?" He replied, "Running late. Unexpected situation. Reschedule if needed." Then he put the phone on silent. Easton knew the weight of the meeting waiting for him the next morning. Any other time in his career, the mere idea of disappointing investors would have been unthinkable. But that night, Numbers, balance sheets, and contracts felt irrelevant compared to what he'd seen in Emma and Everly's eyes. Their image kept coming back like a blow. Two little girls tucked behind the counter, with the same dimples and the same warm brown spark he'd seen in his own reflection since childhood. It wasn't possible, but it also wasn't impossible. When Daisy returned to his booth, she set a small white box in front of him. "Are your pie to go?" she said, almost in a whisper, as if she were stepping onto unstable ground. She glanced at his plate, nearly untouched. "I thought you might want to take dessert with you since you didn't eat much." He tried to answer, but his voice failed. He only nodded slightly in thanks. Then he risked it. "Is there a motel nearby? The weather's terrible and I'd rather not drive far in this rain." She looked almost grateful for a normal question, something less emotional. "There is," she said. "About 3 miles from here, Maple Rest Inn. It's not fancy, but it's safe." She wrote directions on a napkin and handed it to him. The brush of their fingers, quick, almost accidental, left a soft, unnamed tension hanging in the air. He realized they were both grateful for something bigger. He was grateful she hadn't thrown him out. She was grateful he'd backed off, hadn't pushed her past what she could handle. "I'll pay," Easton murmured. Daisy only nodded, offering a shy smile that still carried worry. As he walked toward the door, his stomach tightened, a mix of frustration, fear, and a determination that grew like fire. He wanted answers. He wanted the truth, but Daisy was clearly exhausted. Tonight wasn't the night to corner her again. The storm hit him with fury the second he stepped outside. Wind slapped his suit jacket. Rain turned the road into a trembling mirror of lights and shadows. Every thunderclap seemed to intensify the pressure in his chest. "I'm not leaving without knowing." The promise echoed like a mantra as he climbed into his car. The drive to Maple Rest Inn was short, but his thoughts crashed in waves. His life had always been organized, controlled, methodical. He knew where he'd be every day of the week, knew who he'd meet, what he'd negotiate, but nothing in that plan included daughters, much less 2. The motel sign appeared in the darkness, white letters flickering under the rain. The lobby smelled like old upholstery, worn carpet, and damp wood. The receptionist, a tired man in a pale cardigan, handed him a key without questions. "Room 7, stairs to the left. Careful, gets slippery when it rains." Easton simply nodded. The room was modest, with dated wallpaper and a floral bedspread faded by time. He took off his jacket, loosened his tie, and sat on the edge of the bed. The silence pressed down, and then the question hit like a punch. How did I let my life get to a point where I don't even know if I have 2 daughters? The stained ceiling offered no answers. Not the wind outside. Not the guilt that now seeped into every corner of his mind. During his years of climbing higher, between flights, post-event parties, and nights that blurred together, so many memories had faded. He remembered cities, but not faces. Bars, but not conversations. Encounters, but not names. The realization was brutal. If Emma and Everly were his, then Daisy had carried this story alone for 4 years, while he built his empire brick by brick, never imagining there might be life, warmth, family, waiting for him on the edge of some forgotten highway. When sleep finally came, it was restless. He dreamed of 2 little girls in a massive room, wearing dresses too big for them, reaching for his hand, and he couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only hear his own heartbeat echoing in the silence. He woke before dawn, drained. The storm had weakened and the sky was starting to lighten. He got ready quickly, went downstairs, and left the key on the empty front desk, along with a note saying he'd be back later. The morning road gleamed in golden tones. For the first time, he actually noticed the countryside, green fields, old houses, trucks hauling bundles. There was real life out here, simple, honest, far from the skyscrapers that ruled his days. When he reached the diner, he took a deep breath. Maybe Daisy would be there. Maybe Emma and Everly too. Maybe this time he could talk the right way. But the moment he stepped inside, his stomach sank. The morning shift was packed. Workers grabbing coffee, truckers talking loud, and an older waitress moving between tables. It wasn't Daisy. "She only works afternoons," the woman said when he asked. 2 p.m., sometimes 3. Easton thanked her and ordered coffee. Hours to wait. After he paid, he tried for any scrap of information. "Do you know if her girls go to daycare?" The teenager at the register shrugged. "I don't think so. Sometimes they're here when the sitter can't come." Nothing useful. Easton stepped back outside, walked down the main street, and spotted a small library. He went in. There he flipped through old local papers, searching for any mention of twins, Emma and Everly, or Daisy's last name, if it was ever printed. Nothing, not a single clue. Near noon, exhausted and hungry, he left the library. His phone buzzed. His CFO. "Easton, you vanished. The investor meeting was a disaster without you." Easton inhaled slowly, stared at the quiet street, and answered with calm steel. "Tell them we'll reschedule. I'm dealing with something personal." The words landed heavy, because he almost never put personal life above business. But he didn't feel ashamed. He had to see this through. The CFO protested, shocked, but Easton ended the call anyway, steady. He wasn't turning away now. It was the first time he'd said that, and truly meant it. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel guilty. He just knew one thing. He had to go all the way to the end. Easton checked the time on his phone. 12:45 p.m. If he remembered right, Daisy would start her shift sometime between 2 and 3 house. That gave him a little over 2 hours, hours that felt like an eternity. He went back to the diner's parking lot, still damp from the previous night's storm, and found a small bench beneath a metal awning. He sat there with a bottle of water in his hand, trying to look like he was simply taking a break, when in reality, he was waiting. Locals came and went. A few looked twice. An expensive-looking stranger, tailored blazer, polished shoes flashing against the gravel, sitting perfectly still, watching the entrance like someone waiting for a train that might never arrive. Easton felt how out of place he was in that world, but he didn't leave. His body was there, but his mind stayed locked on Emma and Everly's eyes, on those dimples that matched his. Every minute that passed carried possibility and fear. Then, around 2:20 p.m., the engine of a compact car grumbled as it turned into the lot. It was Daisy's car. Easton stood so fast he almost dropped the bottle. From a distance, he saw the exact moment she recognized him. Her shoulders stiffened, her step faltered, her hand tightened around her bag strap. For a second, he was sure she would throw it in reverse and disappear down the road. But Daisy inhaled deeply, like someone choosing to face what she feared, and she walked toward him. "Mr. Thompson," she greeted softly, her voice steady despite the tension. "I figured you might still be here." He didn't move closer. He didn't want to corner her. "Daisy, I'm sorry if I crossed the line last night," he said, keeping his tone controlled. "But I really need to talk to you. I promise I'll respect your boundaries. I just need honesty." Her gaze flicked toward the diner window, where a co-worker watched with barely disguised curiosity. Daisy let out a resigned breath. "Okay," she murmured. "I've got a few minutes before my shift." She motioned toward the side of the building, a narrow passage where wooden crates were stacked, a discreet corner out of the customer's view. Easton followed, his heart pounding like it might burst. After all those hours, it felt like the truth was finally about to happen. The harsh afternoon light hit Daisy's face, revealing everything. The dark circles from too many sleepless nights, the determination set in her chin, and a sadness underneath that he still couldn't read. "Let me be direct," Easton said quietly. "If I'm wrong, I'll back off, but if there's any chance Emma and Everly are my daughters, I need to know." Her eyes trembled. Before she could answer, a distant rumble rolled through the heavy sky, and the first drops began to fall, tapping against the crates around them. Daisy pressed her lips together, like she was gathering strength to say a truth that carried too much weight. "I never wanted to hide anything," she murmured, almost a whisper, "but sometimes life doesn't give you a choice." Easton swallowed hard. "Daisy, please," he said, unable to hide the urgency now. She closed her eyes for a brief second. When she opened them again, there was a devastating mix of vulnerability and strength in them. "Yes," she said at last, her voice shaking. "Yes, Easton, they're your daughters." Thunder answered overhead, and the rain came down hard, as if the sky had decided to explode at the exact moment his life changed forever. Everything stopped, everything rearranged, everything suddenly weighed more. He was a father. A father. And those two little girls, with almond-shaped eyes and perfect dimples, were his. The storm soaked his hair, his blazer, the ground beneath them. None of it mattered. Daisy stood there, drenched and tense, hugging herself like she was bracing for an explosion. But Easton had no explosion to give. He had silence, shock, and a burning ache in his chest for all the years he'd lost. How he managed. Daisy took a deep breath, trying to sort through painful memories. "We only saw each other once," she began, 5 years ago. "You were passing through, staying at a hotel. I'd had a terrible day at work. My friend insisted we go out for a drink. We talked at the bar. You said your name was Easton, But you never gave me your last name. We talked about family, about loss, and that we were both kind of broken that night. She looked away, embarrassed. Things happened fast, and when I woke up, you were gone. The front desk said you left early to catch a flight. His chest went heavy. Fragments came back in flashes. Laughter, a hotel bar, an unexpectedly honest conversation, trembling hands holding his, and then the rush to the airport. Daisy continued. When I found out I was pregnant, weeks had already passed. I tried to find you, I really did. But I didn't have your number, I didn't have your last name, I had nothing. I wrote letters to the hotel, asked staff, tried to figure out if there was an Easton in real estate, but no one knew. She blinked hard against the rain like she was trying to wipe away tears that wouldn't stop. In the end, I had to accept you weren't coming, and that I'd have to raise the girls alone. Something shook loose inside Easton. Every word was a silent accusation, not because she meant it that way, but because he knew the truth. He hadn't been there. No meeting, no signed building, no bank account could justify that. Daisy, I'm so sorry. For everything, he said, his voice breaking for the first time in years. She met his eyes, fear and strength at war in her face. I'm just scared, she admitted. Emma and Everly are everything I have. I've been mom and dad. I took care of them, protected them, fought for them. You showing up now could turn their whole life upside down. And what if you disappear again? The hit landed clean, but he didn't step back. I won't disappear, he said, steel in his voice. Not this time. I want to know them. I want to be in their lives. I want to do what I should have done from the beginning. The silence between them turned thick, electric. The back door creaked, making both of them flinch. One of Daisy's co-workers appeared. Daisy, are you coming back? She asked, drying her hands on her apron. Daisy inhaled, then took half a step away from Easton. I'm coming. The door closed again, leaving them alone for one more second. The rain finally began to ease when the back door closed behind Daisy's co-worker, leaving her alone with Easton again, in that narrow space behind the diner. Water ran from her hair, dripping onto her apron, and her eyes still carried the weight of what she'd just confessed. The air between them felt charged, like her words had knocked the world off its axis. Daisy wrapped her arms around herself, as if she were trying to keep her heart from falling apart. I need to get back inside, she murmured, her voice low and trembling. But we can't keep talking out here like this, soaked, in the middle of my shift. She took a deep breath, choosing each word carefully. I work late today. If you're really serious, come back after 9. We'll talk properly when I'm done. For a second, Easton thought his heart might leap right out of his chest. I'll be here, he said without thinking, without hesitating, without even breathing. Daisy took a step toward the door but paused with her hand on the knob, not looking back. Oh, and please, her voice faltered slightly. Don't try to see the girls before we talk again. I need to be sure of everything. It sounded like a request, but it was also a warning. Easton nodded with the gravity of a man who understood what was at stake. She went inside. The door shut, and suddenly, the alley felt far too small to hold the avalanche inside him. Emma, Everly, 4 years. The dimples, the eyes. The pieces fit together so fast he could barely keep up. He walked to his car with heavy steps, breathing like someone who'd just run a marathon. Fine rain tapped the windshield as he slid into the driver's seat and finally allowed his body to loosen. But his mind stayed on fire. He grabbed his phone. Missed calls, urgent messages, emails about a crucial meeting. The world he'd held steady with firm hands for most of his life suddenly felt like a tired giant, distant, almost irrelevant. He typed, "Personal emergency, out indefinitely. Keep me updated only when necessary," and hit send. No guilt, no fear. For the first time, a decision wasn't made for shareholders, deadlines, or targets, but for 2 4-year-old girls he'd never even met. The hours until Daisy's shift ended were quiet torture. Easton couldn't sit still. He bought a dry shirt at a small shop, booked more nights at the Maple Rest Inn, walked up and down the main street like he was trying to learn the rhythm of that town's breath. In the rearview mirror, he caught his own face, dark circles under his eyes, tension lines, but something new, a spark he hadn't seen since his father, the man who taught him everything, even how to love a business like it was family, his father, who had raised him alone, his father, whose death had ripped the ground out from under Easton, and now Easton was a father who hadn't known he was one. The irony hit like a punch. At 9 p.m., the neon sign went dark. The front door opened slowly. Daisy stepped out, clutching her coat, her face exhausted but steady. She locked the door before finally looking at him. There was fear in her eyes. There was hope, too. "I asked my neighbor to keep Emma and Everly until tomorrow morning," she said softly. "So we have time to talk." Easton exhaled, slow. "Thank you." She hesitated, biting her lip. I can't bring you to my place. It's not..." Her eyes shifted away. "It's not ready for visitors, but there's a coffee shop at the edge of town. We can go there." "Let's go," he answered immediately. "Wherever you feel comfortable." They walked side by side to his car, the silence between them thick with questions and promises neither of them had said out loud yet. The cafe was lit with warm bulbs and smelled like espresso and day-old muffins. Only a few customers remained, all lost in their own worlds. They slid into a booth in the back. They ordered coffee and tea, and then they sat across from each other, not like strangers, not like acquaintances, but like two lives that had suddenly been bound together by something enormous. Daisy took a deep breath. "I need you to understand. I never wanted to hide the girls from you. I couldn't find you. I didn't know your last name. I didn't know anything except your first name and that you traveled all the time for work." She bit her lip, nervous. "I wrote letters to the hotel, asked around at the bar, followed every tiny clue I could. But you disappeared from my life like you'd never existed." Guilt settled heavy in Easton's chest. "I didn't leave because I wanted to abandon you," he said, his voice rough. "I was wrecked. My dad had just died. I buried myself in work. I traveled non-stop. I lost myself in parties, meetings, anything that could numb what I was feeling." He dragged a hand through his hair. "I became the man who builds empires, but doesn't know how to hold on to people. And that's why that night feels blurred in my memory. Not because it didn't matter, because it did, but because back then I was trying not to feel anything at all." Daisy's eyes softened, still cautious, but softer. "Losing someone changes you," she whispered. "It does," Easton agreed. "My dad was everything to me. He raised me alone. He was my safe place. And when he died, I got scared of loving and losing again. So I kept my distance from everyone, even from myself." Daisy lowered her gaze. "Meanwhile, I was taking care of 2 babies, alone, counting coins to buy formula, working 12-hour overnight shifts, trying to be mom and dad and everything." She drew in a shaky breath. "So, do you understand why I'm scared now? Your world is so different from ours. I don't want Emma and Everly to get attached to you, just for you to disappear again." The pain hit Easton like silent thunder. "I won't disappear," he said, and this time there was real force behind it. "You set the pace, I'll follow. Daisy, I'm not here to erase you or make you feel smaller. You're their mother. You did everything for them. I'm not taking that away." His voice stayed firm, but full of respect. "I just hope we can find balance. And if that means parking my luxury car at the edge of town and walking to your door, I'll do it." A small, almost involuntary smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, trying to lighten the weight, even just a little. Daisy looked surprised. "That might actually be worth seeing," she murmured, a half smile appearing. But then her shoulders fell again. "We can't pretend money doesn't matter," she said, eyes dropping to the table. "The girls will start preschool soon. Supplies, doctor visits. They deserve opportunities if you're offering help, but I won't refuse. But accepting it is hard. I've always had pride in doing it alone." "I understand," Easton said gently. "We don't have to solve the practical side tonight. One step at a time." He held her gaze. "First step, you let me see them, meet them for real, in whatever way feels right to you. Then we talk about the rest. Okay?" She hesitated for a second, then nodded. "Okay. But if at any point I feel like this is hurting them, I'm stopping everything." "I respect that," he answered, serious. "I want what's best for them, too." That's when they realized the barista was watching them with a polite smile, clearly waiting to close. Daisy checked the time. It was nearing 11 p.m., far past the hour most people in that town would already be asleep. They gathered their coats and stepped outside together. "I think we've talked enough for today," Daisy said, breaking the silence. "I agree," Easton replied. "I'll stay at the Maple Rest Inn as long as it takes. You already have my number. You can call me anytime, or I can stop by after your shift. Whatever makes you feel safest." Daisy hesitated. "The girls need to meet you soon," she murmured. "But I want to prepare them. Explain calmly that someone special is going to show up. I don't want to just say, 'Hey, this is the dad you've never met.'" The attempt at a joke came out shaky, but it brought a little lightness. "Thank you for being open to this, Daisy. Easton said, sincere. "I promise, I won't let you down." The silence that followed carried everything that still didn't have a name: fear, hope, anticipation. Then suddenly she took a small step forward and rested her hand against his cheek. "Don't hurt us," she whispered, vulnerable. "I can't go through this again, and I won't let Emma and Everly go through it either." He covered her hand with his. "I won't," he said, each word heavy with truth. Daisy stepped back with a soft exhale. They shared one last look, an unspoken agreement. Then she walked to her car. Within seconds, she disappeared down the quiet street. Easton stood there, breathing in the cold night air, feeling both steadier and completely out of place. His phone vibrated in his pocket with yet another business call. He let it ring until it went to voicemail. That night, only one thing mattered: the commitment that had just been born inside him. He wasn't going to fail those children, not the woman who had raised them alone. Back at the Maple Rest Inn, the musty smell and peeling wallpaper felt irrelevant. Easton fell onto the bed, exhausted, but sleep took its time. His mind kept spinning. Daisy talking about the struggle, the twins described in detail, her hand on his face, like a seal on a final decision. Yes, he was a father, and he would show up, for real. But the questions were endless. How did he balance a real estate empire that devoured every minute with the routine of 2 4-year-old girls? Would he have the courage to give up some control? And if it cost him everything he'd built, would any of it still matter as much? When he finally drifted off, his dreams were shallow and restless. 2 little girls running toward him, calling out a name he still wasn't used to hearing. The next morning, pale light slipped through the dusty curtains. Easton sat up in bed, his stomach tight with a mix of fear and anticipation. Maybe today he'd meet Emma and Everly. Maybe not. He knew he had to respect Daisy's timing. He grabbed his phone. Missed calls, emails, messages about meetings, and in the middle of it all, a different kind of notification. "Good morning. Let's talk at lunch. The girls have a play meet-up at the park. If you want to come, we can keep it casual. Go slow." Warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you for letting me do this. I definitely want to come. Just send me the place and the time." She replied with the name of a simple park in town and a time, 12:30 p.m. He showered, chose less formal clothes, jeans, a clean shirt, discreet shoes. He didn't want to look like the CEO from the headlines. He wanted to look human. After a quick coffee, he drove to the area near the park just to see it from a distance. The place was modest. Swings, a slide, a patch of grass cut through with trees. Kids ran around, parents talked. Easton sat in his car for a few minutes, imagining Emma and Everly there, laughing, calling for their mother. To kill time, he walked along the main street until a small toy shop caught his eye. He remembered Daisy saying there wasn't much money left over for extras. He thought about the girls he hadn't given a single gift to in 4 years. He didn't want to overdo it. But he also didn't want to show up empty-handed. Inside the shop, he found 2 identical stuffed puppies, brown, floppy-eared. They looked like they'd been made for twins. He bought both, asked for simple wrapping with delicate ribbon, and walked out carrying the little bag like it was something sacred. At 12:20, he was back at the park. He saw Daisy first, sitting on a bench in the shade, talking with a neighbor. And then he saw them, 2 little girls on the climbing structure, hair tied in messy ponytails, colorful shirts, laughter cutting the air like bells. Even from a distance, the resemblance was undeniable. The same features, the same left cheek dimple Easton saw every day in the mirror. One shot down the slide, fearless, laughing loud. The other studied the height before letting go, more careful. Emma and Everly. Daisy spotted him and lifted her hand discreetly. The neighbor murmured something, smiled at him from afar, then stepped away, giving them space. Easton walked closer, the bag clenched between his fingers. Daisy stood, her nerves visible in her eyes. "They're right there," she said softly. "Let me call them over first, okay?" He only nodded. Daisy walked toward the playground. "Girls! Emma, Everly, come here for a second." Both of them turned at the same time. And in that instant, Easton's world shrank until it fit inside the awkward little steps of 2 twins running over the sandy path. Mirrored faces, eyes just like his, identical dimples. They stopped beside their mother, still a little breathless. "Mom, can we get ice cream after?" Emma asked, impulsive. "Maybe," Daisy replied, smoothing her daughter's hair. "But first, I want you to meet someone." The girls followed their mother's gaze to the tall man standing a few steps behind. Easton took a deep breath. "Hi, I'm Easton," he said, crouching down to their level. "It's really nice to meet you. He's a friend of Mommy's." Daisy added calmly. We invited him to come play with us today. Emma stared at him with wide open curiosity. Everly edged closer to Daisy, half hidden behind her. Easton lifted the bag. I brought you something. If your mom thinks that's okay. Daisy gave a small sign of approval. He pulled out the 2 stuffed puppies. Emma practically snatched hers from his hand, grinning ear to ear. Her face lit up. A puppy! I love it! She squealed, already making little barking sounds and hugging it tight. Everly, on the other hand, stroked the soft fur slowly, a shy smile appearing. She looked up at Easton with a sweet mix of gratitude and uncertainty. Thank you, she murmured softly, her voice small and tender. Relief washed over him like a wave. Easton smiled, swallowing the emotion. I'm glad you like them. Daisy rested a hand on Everly's shoulder, and when she lifted her eyes to Easton, a flicker of gratitude showed through. The rest of the time became a careful dance. Emma racing across the park with her stuffed puppy, dragging her new friend to show him every corner. Everly staying closer, taking cautious little steps until she moved toward him on her own. Easton asked what cartoons they liked, what games they loved. Emma answered everything without a filter. Everly listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes only watching, studying the man whose eyes looked so much like hers. Beside them, Daisy monitored every gesture, every word, every glance, helping when she could, filling in details, keeping the air lighter. Whenever there was an opening, Easton told little stories about airplane trips, snow in other places, buildings so tall they looked like they touched the sky. He spoke simply, almost playfully, without a hint of a millionaire's posture. He didn't want to crush anyone under the weight of who he was, a father, maybe their father. Emma was the first to loosen up. Come push me, she demanded, grabbing his hand without ceremony. The moment nearly stripped away the last piece of armor Easton still had. Emma on the swing, going higher and higher, laughing, hair flying, yelling, higher, with every push. Easton pushing carefully at first, then a little stronger, her laughter ringing through the park like pure, bright joy. Everly watched it all, hugging her stuffed puppy, until she finally climbed onto the swing beside her sister. Daisy stood behind her, pushing gently, and Everly kept looking side to side, torn between the urge to copy her sister and the desire to stay safe. Half an hour later, with the sun warming the air, Daisy suggested a break in the shade. Sitting on the grass, Easton listened as Emma explained with intense enthusiasm that when she grew up she wanted to be a space animal scientist and bring her stuffed puppy inside the spaceship. Everly leaned against Daisy, eating a snack, calm, but her eyes kept drifting back to him. It was a simple scene, almost ordinary, but to Easton it felt enormous. He tried to lock every detail into his memory, the rustle of trees, the smell of grass, the sound of laughter, the way Daisy smiled, still cautious, but softer now. Daisy's phone buzzed. She checked the screen and gently said they had to go. The neighbor who helped with the girls had an appointment. Emma complained immediately, begging for just 5 more minutes, but gave in when Daisy promised they'd come back another day. Everly pressed the stuffed puppy to her chest like a tiny shield. On the way out of the park, Emma turned back to him. You can come again, right? She asked, eyes huge. Next time we can play toy car races. Emotion rose thick in Easton's throat. He looked at Daisy. She gave a discreet nod, leaving the choice in his hands. I can, he said, crouching to their height. I'd really like that, if Mommy thinks it's okay too. Everly tugged the hem of Daisy's shirt. Can he bring more puppies? She whispered, half hiding her face. Easton laughed softly, feeling a new kind of warmth spread through his chest. We'll see, Daisy replied, biting back a smile in his direction. We take it one day at a time, okay? The girls lifted their stuffed puppies like little flags of goodbye. Daisy guided them to her modest car, buckling their seatbelts with careful hands. It had all lasted less than an hour, but it left Easton shaking on the inside, the clumsy joy of a brand new father meeting his daughters, a near-desperate need to be worthy of their trust. When the car disappeared around the corner, Easton stayed standing there for a few seconds, his heart full and his mind on fire with plans. For the first time, he understood that no deal, no perfect white boardroom, compared to the smile of a child calling his name. Back in his car, he sat in silence for a moment. Summer heat warmed the interior, but he barely noticed. All he could hear on repeat was Emma's laughter, Everly's shy thank you, and Daisy's watchful presence in the background. He started the engine and drove back to Maple Rest Inn, carrying a new kind of responsibility with him. In the modest room, He picked up his phone. Dozens of notifications. Messages from the CFO, the board, investors. One stood out. "Easton, we need your position on the major acquisition. Investors are restless. Respond ASAP." Days ago, that would have thrown him into immediate crisis mode. Now it felt like it belonged to another life. Still, he knew he couldn't simply disappear. He took a deep breath and called the CFO. "Finally," came the tense voice on the other end. "You vanish, you don't respond, and I'm putting out fires with half information. What is going on?" Easton sat up straighter on the bed. "I had a serious personal situation," he said, steady. "I'm not going into details right now, but I need you to keep the company running without me for a while." The CFO almost laughed, disbelieving. "Easton, you are the company's face. The board won't accept a disappearance. The investors—" "I know," Easton cut in, never losing his calm. "But we built strong leadership for a reason. Delegate the negotiations. Close the acquisition with the board's support. Loop me into emails. We can do quick video calls if absolutely necessary. But I'm not traveling or going back to the old routine anytime soon." Heavy silence. "I'll do what I can," the CFO said finally. "But there could be consequences. Their confidence might shake." "I trust you," Easton said, "and I'll take the consequences." When he hung up, his heart was beating fast, but there was a strange clarity. That call felt like a turning point, a clean line between the man he'd been and the man he was starting to become. His phone buzzed again. A new message, this time from Daisy. "Hope the girls didn't wear you out too much. They have endless energy. Thank you for being so kind. We got home and they won't stop asking if you're coming back. I told them yes, but I still don't know when." A smile came to his lips without effort. "They didn't wear me out at all. They're incredible. Thank you for letting me meet them. I'm here. I'm free. Just tell me what feels best for you." Her reply came quickly. "They asked about dinner. If you're still in town, maybe tomorrow we can do something simple at my place. I can make something, or we can order pizza. Let me know." Easton's chest tightened. An invitation into the home where Emma and Everly lived, the center of their small universe. "That would be wonderful. I'd love that. Just tell me how I can help." A few seconds passed. "We'll figure it out later. See you tomorrow at 6. He confirmed with a short message, set his phone down and stared at the ceiling with a disbelieving smile. Dinner with his daughters, with Daisy, in their home. The next day, so he wouldn't lose his mind waiting, he walked around town, stopped at the local market, and chose a simple bouquet. Daisies and carnations, nothing extravagant, and a tub of ice cream, remembering how kids always lit up at that word. Just before 6, he parked in front of a small duplex. The house was simple but clean, with a porch where the paint had worn thin and a patch of grass that needed cutting. He took a deep breath, grabbed the flowers and the ice cream, climbed the steps, and knocked. The sound felt too loud, like it was announcing not just a visit. Easton heard footsteps on the other side of the door before it opened. Daisy appeared with a slightly tired but welcoming smile. "Hi," she said, and her gaze dropped to the bouquet in his hands. "Come in." The living room was small but alive. Crayon drawings covered the walls, some in cheap frames, others taped up wherever there was space. A couch faced an old TV. Shelves held children's books, stuffed animals, toys scattered across the carpet. To him, it looked like everything his luxury house had never had. Life. From the hallway came the smell of tomato sauce simmering on the stove. On the floor, Emma was pushing toy cars down a makeshift ramp built from pillows. The second she saw him, she popped up. "You came!" Everly, a little behind her, let a shy smile slip out. She clutched the same stuffed puppy from yesterday against her chest. "Hi, you two," Easton said, fighting the urge to pull them into his arms. Then he turned to Daisy and held out the bouquet. "These are for you, and I brought ice cream, if that's okay." A soft blush rose to her cheeks. "You didn't have to," she murmured. "But the thank you was genuine. The flowers are beautiful, and the girls are definitely going to love the ice cream." As if on cue, Emma nearly shouted, "Ice cream? What kind?" "Vanilla," Easton said with a laugh. "I didn't know what you like, but I brought this to help." He pulled out a small packet of rainbow sprinkles. "That's the best one," Emma declared like she was passing a law. Everly peeked into the bag and gave a silent, approving nod. "Make yourself comfortable," Daisy said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "I just made spaghetti." The table's set. "Girls, wash your hands first." Emma and Everly sprinted toward the bathroom, talking a mile a minute. For a few seconds, the house held only the two adults, wrapped in the distant clatter of pots and the low hum of a fan. "Thank you for inviting me," Easton said quietly. "It means more than I can explain." Daisy breathed out slowly. I thought we needed to try something. Normal, she replied. They saw you at the park, but their life is this. Dinner, bath time, a story before bed, those things matter. The words "a story before bed" hit him straight in the chest. He pictured himself there, book in hand, tucking blankets in, present. I'd love to be part of that. When you're ready, he admitted, emotion slipping into his voice. Let's see how dinner goes first, she said with a small smile. One step at a time, okay? He nodded, almost relieved by the anchor. In the compact kitchen, the wooden table leaned slightly. The chairs didn't match. The stove was basic, but the space felt warm from the smell of sauce and the energy of the twins. Daisy served the plates, refusing his help with a stubborn little gesture. Emma attacked the spaghetti like it was the most important meal in the world. Everly studied her plate first, making sure nothing would spill over the edge, and only then began to eat. Easton sat beside them, and an unexpected warmth spread through him. This is where I should be, he thought, not at the head of a boardroom table, but at this small table, sharing pasta with two girls who had his eyes. Conversation came in waves of childhood. Emma explained with absolute seriousness that a rocket needs really angry fire to go up. Everly described a ladybug she'd found on the window, talking about its spots like they were secrets. Daisy cut through the chaos with gentle corrections. Don't talk with your mouth full. Easy with the fork, Emma. Everly, wipe your mouth with your napkin. Easton asked about their day, about school, about favorite cartoons. Now and then he told funny travel stories, getting lost in an airport, seeing snow for the first time, always keeping the weight of luxury hotels and meetings out of it. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a family forming. Every so often, he caught Daisy watching him. Her gaze measured everything, how the girls reacted, his gestures, his tone, and whenever she saw Emma laugh out loud or Everly relax a little more, Daisy's face softened. When the plates were empty, the chorus began. Dessert! Daisy lifted an eyebrow at Easton, granting him the honor. He pulled the ice cream from the freezer and opened the sprinkles. Dessert turned into a celebration. Emma poured on way too many sprinkles, building a colorful mountain. Everly carefully separated hers into tiny piles before mixing them in. Easton laughed as he wiped drips off the table and off the girls' chins. Later, with the sky turning lilac in the window, Daisy suggested some quiet time in the living room. Emma dragged over a box of cars, dolls, and blocks. Everly brought a coloring book filled with robots and weird little creatures. Easton sat cross-legged on the rug. Emma recruited him for a toy car race with dramatic commentary. Then Everly called him with nothing but a look, handed him a colored pencil, and he joined her, drawing clumsy robots and making up stories as he went. There, surrounded by cheap toys, crooked drawings, and laughter, Easton forgot investors, mergers, quarterly reports. For a few minutes, the whole world fit inside that living room. Yawns arrived quietly. First Everly, then Emma, pretending she wasn't tired. Bedtime, Daisy announced, firm but loving. The twins protested, but without much fight. Easton stood, suddenly unsure whether he should say goodbye right there or follow them. He paused in the hallway, caught between instinct and respect. Daisy noticed. Do you want to read them a story? She asked carefully. I usually read on the couch, or in their room. Your choice. For a second he forgot how to breathe. I do, he answered softly. Emma's eyes lit up. Everly hugged her stuffed puppy tighter, but nodded shyly. Daisy picked a book about a little astronaut and her space dinosaur, almost a mirror of Emma's dreams. They settled on the couch, one twin on each side of Easton, Daisy in a nearby armchair. Easton read slowly, changing his tone for each feeling: excitement, fear, courage. Emma interrupted to comment on every picture. Everly listened with her shoulder gently resting against his arm, eyelids growing heavy. When the story ended, both girls were fighting sleep. Daisy led them to the bedroom, two small beds with different sheets, full of mixed-up prints. She kissed each forehead. Easton stayed at the doorway, afraid of intruding. Emma turned, hugging the puppy. Good night, she murmured, peeking at him for a second. Good night, Star, he whispered, throat tight. Everly managed a tiny smile before closing her eyes. Daisy turned off the main light and left only a night lamp shaped like a moon. She pulled the door closed gently, then returned to the hallway where the house sounded softer, more intimate. Thank you, she said, leaning lightly against the wall, for making this so easy for them, and for me. I didn't expect it to feel so natural. Easton breathed out. No, thank you, Daisy. His gaze drifted back to the closed door. That was everything to me. They walked to the front door. On the simple porch, under the weak light, they faced each other. He felt it, almost tangible, the fragile bond being born there, not only between him and the girls, but between him and Daisy too, as two adults trying to learn how to share the responsibility of loving the same children. He didn't dare cross that line. "Good night," she said softly. "Drive safe. Good night. Thank you for letting me into their lives, and into yours." A small smile appeared on her face before the door closed with a quiet click. Easton walked down the steps slowly, feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. He sat in his car and stared for a moment at the little duplex glowing from inside. In there, two girls were sleeping, and a woman who had raised them alone was, little by little, making room for him. Little by little, Easton understood that being a father had nothing to do with expensive gifts or a powerful last name. It was spaghetti at a cramped table, ice cream with sprinkles falling onto the floor, crayon drawings on the wall, and sleepy voices saying good night. He started the engine but didn't drive away right away. He let the certainty settle. He had promised he would be there. Morning light slipped through the motel room's worn curtains when Easton woke up. For a split second, he thought of reports, metrics, investors. Then the first image that came was two little girls with eyes like his, probably already racing around the living room while Daisy made coffee. In the week that followed that first dinner, a new rhythm began to form. Easton spent more nights in the small town. He helped with bath time, filling the bathroom with laughter and splashes, read stories on the couch, tried to recreate Daisy's spaghetti, and became the punchline when he overcooked the pasta. On weekends, he took Emma and Everly to the park or the library for story hour, giving Daisy a rare pocket of time for herself. Sometimes she came along. Sometimes she stayed home to rest, pay bills, breathe. The modest house started to fill with tiny routines. Emma scattered cars and dolls through every room. Everly organized books by color and complained when anyone moved anything out of place. The twins didn't call him Dad. Daisy had been clear she would let them decide if and when that title ever made sense. He respected that, but deep down, the hope for that word followed him into every good night he whispered. While his life there began growing roots, the corporate world started pounding louder at the door. The CFO sent updates that grew more tense by the day. Board members pushed for dates, deadlines, formal commitments. Easton answered as best he could between bedtime stories and trips to the playground, trying to hold the company together without abandoning the girls, until the rope finally snapped in the most ordinary place possible, the grocery store. They were pushing a small cart down the pasta aisle, debating sauce flavors, when his phone buzzed 4 times in a row. Easton glanced at the screen. CFO. He threw Daisy a silent apology and stepped a few feet away, stopping behind a stack of tomatoes. "What is it?" he murmured. On the other end came a heavy sigh. "Easton, the board scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow afternoon," the CFO said. "They're threatening to push the new acquisition through without you. Investors are restless. People are already talking about replacing leadership if this disappearance keeps going." Easton's heart slammed. "Replacing leadership? They can't just remove me." "Not yet," the CFO replied. "But if you stay away, they can vote changes, bring in an interim CEO, redraw the whole structure. The atmosphere is ugly." Easton dragged a hand down his face, feeling the weight of 2 lives pulling him in opposite directions. Not long ago, he'd been untouchable inside his own company. Now his absence had become ammunition. His mind immediately flashed to Emma on the swing, to Everly curled beside him with her coloring book, to the way Daisy had looked at him the night before, like for the first time she wasn't completely alone. If I lose the company, would that make me freer to stay here? The answer came with another question, and their security, and the employees, the projects, everything that depends on that empire. The knot tightened. "Schedule a virtual board meeting," Easton decided. "I'll join from here, but I'm not coming back to the city right now. That's my decision." "Are you sure?" the CFO pressed. "Video may not be enough." "Do it," Easton repeated, firmer. "Send me the time and the agenda." When he hung up, Emma was triumphant with a box of colorful cereal in her hands, and Everly was reading the label like it was a contract. Daisy watched him in silence, like she knew that call hadn't been just anything. "Work," he summarized. "No details. Not there, not in front of the girls." Only that night did the two of them sit on the couch after Emma and Everly fell asleep in the sticker-covered bedroom. Daisy caught the tension in his jaw. "You're worried," she said gently. "Want to tell me?" He thought about minimizing it, saying, "It's nothing." But this was Daisy, the woman who carried the twins alone for 4 years. So he told her. The board, the investors, the rumor of leadership change, the emergency meeting, the feeling of losing control of the company he'd built. Daisy listened in silence, hugging a pillow. "I figured this would knock on the door eventually," she murmured. "You built your whole life around that company." "I did," he admitted, "and now it feels like I could lose everything. Right when I found Emma, Everly, and you. If I give up too much, how do I guarantee their future? How do I help you the way you deserve?" She rested her hand on his arm. "The girls don't need you to be a billionaire, Easton," she said with a half-sad smile. "They need you to show up, to love them. But I know money matters too. Doctors, school rent, everything is expensive. We can't pretend it doesn't exist." He exhaled. "I don't know how to balance it." Daisy thought for a moment, choosing her words. "Maybe you don't have to abandon everything or live here forever," she suggested. "You can split your time, some in the city, some here. You can restructure your role, let someone you trust run the day-to-day. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but if the company still matters to you, maybe there's a middle." Her words stayed echoing. "Tomorrow I have a virtual board meeting," Easton said. "They're going to want guarantees, and I don't know if I can promise what they want to hear." "Then don't promise what you can't deliver," Daisy said, steady. "Negotiate. At the end of the day, you're the guy who taught everyone how to negotiate, aren't you?" He let out a low laugh. "Sometimes even the CEO doesn't have that much power." Still, that night, back in the motel room, he opened his laptop and started building a plan. He drafted a bold proposal, a formal split in leadership. The CFO would take operational command as an executive president, reporting to the board. Easton would remain CEO, focused on strategy, major decisions and investor relations, with the freedom to work remotely for long stretches. It was something he'd never once considered. It was also the only way he wouldn't disappear from the twins' lives. The next day at 3 p.m., the meeting began. The screen filled with faces, some worried, some cold, some faintly irritated. The CFO looked more tense than usual. An older board member spoke first. "Easton, it's good to finally see you. We need to understand, are you still fully committed to this company?" Easton straightened his shoulders, sitting in a simple chair in an ordinary motel room, a very different image from the glass-walled offices they were all used to. "I am committed," he said, "and that's exactly why I called this meeting. I want to propose a new leadership structure." He explained the plan calmly. The CFO running day-to-day operations, Easton staying on top of strategy, remote meetings, physical presence for key events, less control, more delegation, more space for his new life. When he finished, silence turned into an uncomfortable murmur. One of the most resistant board members leaned toward the camera. "This is highly irregular, Easton," he snapped. "You're basically asking to be a part-time CEO. That's not how you run an international real estate empire." The old Easton might have backed down, promised to make it up later, booked a flight back to the city that very night. This time, he didn't. He took a slow breath, thinking of Emma laughing on the swing, of Everly dozing with her head against his arm while he read her a story. And he said, "Times have changed, so have I. If you want me to stay in this role, this is what it needs to look like." A long discussion followed. Some board members showed doubt. Others admitted that Easton's leadership had driven the company's success, and that if he stepped away completely, the impact would be even worse. After careful back and forth, a compromise finally surfaced. They would accept the arrangement on a 3-month trial. After that, they would evaluate the results and the investors' reaction. Exhausted but relieved, Easton ended the call feeling like he'd won a battle, even though a hollow ache remained. 3 months of partial presence. Would that be enough time to strengthen his bond with Emma and Everly, or too little for them to truly get used to him? That afternoon, he drove to Daisy's house with a bouquet of daisies, not as a grand gesture, but as quiet gratitude. The girls were in the yard, chasing soap bubbles a neighbor kid was blowing. Daisy met him at the door, worry in her eyes. "So?" she asked softly. He managed a tired smile. "At least I still have the title. I'll split the role for the next 3 months and stay here most of the time. After that, we'll see." Relief moved across her face. "I'm glad. That gives us time. Time for you to get used to being with the girls more." She accepted the flowers and invited him in. The house smelled like homemade soup. The girls' laughter drifted through the open windows. Later, they sat on the small porch, watching Emma and Everly play in a second-hand kiddie pool. Easton explained the trial period the board had demanded, and the fear of what came after. Daisy crossed her arms, thoughtful. If they force you to come back full-time, we'll deal with that when it comes. Maybe by then, we'll have found a routine that works for everyone. The phrase will hit Easton right in the chest. Sometimes I feel like I'm intruding too much, he admitted. But I don't want to lose a single day with them. Daisy smiled softly. You're not intruding. And yes, I'm terrified something will pull you away from here, but I can see how happy they are when you show up. Everly's even talking more, and Emma keeps saying, Easton can fix our broken bike. She laughed, amused. They adore you, even if they're not calling you Dad yet. The knot in his chest tightened. They adore me, he whispered. I adore them too. They became my whole world so fast. Daisy placed her hand over his. Then we keep building this, she said. One day at a time. A shout cut through the moment. Mom, look, I can float on my back, Emma yelled, lying in the shallow pool water like it was an ocean. They both laughed. Easton stepped closer, rolled up his pant legs, waded into the tiny pool, and played, helped, chased the twins around. Even Everly, usually more reserved, burst into laughter when he lifted her and spun her once in the air before setting her down again. Right then, Easton understood. That was the future he wanted to protect, even if it meant facing irritated investors, tense meetings, or learning how to fix a 4-year-old's bike. But when the house grew quiet, the fear returned. What if, in 3 months, the board demanded his full return? What if Daisy refused to leave this town? Would he have to leave Daisy and the girls behind? He inhaled slowly and repeated her words in his mind, one day at a time. That night, after helping with bath time and tucking the girls in, he stayed to straighten up the living room. While they folded towels and picked up toys, Daisy murmured, I never imagined I'd be doing this with you, sharing daily chores, talking about board meetings and preschool in the same conversation. But I'm glad it's happening. He set down a toy car and without thinking reached for her hand. Her fingers threaded through his, warm, steady. The air shifted. There was something unspoken there, more than co-parents, but neither of them crossed that line. The girls came first. Still, when Easton left, the feeling of Daisy's hand in his stayed with him, and with it came the certainty that sometimes letting go of old ambitions makes room for unimaginable blessings. He was risking the company's stability, but gaining bedtime stories, laughter, and simple routines with 2 little girls who were already his universe. In the weeks that followed, a real rhythm formed. Easton stayed present at the company through video calls, from the motel room or Daisy's kitchen. Sometimes Emma and Everly wandered into frame, charming executives without even trying. And despite the shadow of the 3-month deadline, Easton felt like he'd found a new center. But not everything was simple. One night during dinner, Daisy placed a few envelopes on the table. I need to show you something, she said quietly. These are bills. They cut my hours. My paycheck came smaller. I'm behind on the electricity, and rent is due next week. Guilt rose sharp in Easton's throat. He could pay everything in a heartbeat, but he understood her pride. Let me help, he said gently. They're my responsibility too now. After a pause, Daisy agreed. He paid the rent and the electric bill, and that gesture opened a new level of intimacy. She finally let him carry some of the weight she'd held alone for years. Over time, Daisy shared more of the struggle, second-hand clothes, skipped meals, tight choices. Easton wanted to offer her a better life immediately, but he held back. She needed time. And then, as the second month of the trial period neared its end, the board's patience ran out. An urgent video call pulled them all face to face over a problem that threatened to unravel everything. Easton joined the meeting sitting on Daisy's living room couch. The girls were in the backyard playing with a neighbor's son. Daisy was in the kitchen washing dishes. On the screen, the CFO looked grim, surrounded by a few board members. Stanton, the oldest board member, famous for his bluntness, took the floor. Easton, we have a problem. The Omega Group is about to walk away from the partnership. They say your absence signals instability. They want guarantees of consistent leadership, or they'll invest elsewhere. Easton's stomach dropped. How big is this deal? He asked. The CFO cleared his throat. Massive. Hundreds of millions in potential revenue and long-term synergy. If they pull back, our expansion plan takes a direct hit. Stanton's tone hardened. We tried to calm things down by highlighting the interim president, but it's not enough. They're demanding to meet you in person. They want a face-to-face negotiation. The silence that followed felt heavy. Easton flicked a quick glance toward the kitchen. Daisy was still there, half visible, definitely hearing the tone of his voice. The message was clear. Come back now. Reassure the partner. Secure the deal. The CFO added, almost apologetic, you know how important this is. A trip back to headquarters, just a few days to wrap it up. This negotiation can stabilize a lot. Easton inhaled slowly. Could he be gone for days? Daisy had gotten used to having him around. Emma and Everly too. In such a short time, they'd already woven Easton into every routine, from breakfast to good night. Breaking that even briefly scared him. But if the deal collapsed, the board could use the failure to push him out, and he'd lose the financial footing that now helped Daisy and the girls. He clenched his jaw. If I go, it'll be for a short time, just long enough to lock in the partnership. Then I'm coming back here, that's not up for discussion. Stanton's eyes narrowed. Do whatever it takes, but we need a show of strong leadership. Don't go in halfway. Impress them, or they're gone. The CFO wrapped up. We'll arrange the earliest flight possible. Let us know as soon as you can so we can finalize the schedule. When the call ended, Easton sat completely still, tension stretched tight like a wire about to snap. Daisy stepped beside the couch, dish towel still in her hands. I heard some of it, she said softly. They need you to go in person, don't they? He dragged a hand through his hair. Yeah, it's a huge deal. If I don't go, we could lose it. And the board could try to take me down for good. She sat on the arm of the couch, worried. How long would you have to be gone? A few days, maybe a week if the negotiations drag, he said, swallowing hard, already picturing Emma's face when she realized he wouldn't be there for bedtime stories. I'm scared they'll think I'm abandoning everything. Daisy rested her hand on his shoulder. Tell them the truth in a way they can understand, she said. Say you have to go fix something important at work, but that you're coming back. Kids understand more than people think when they trust the person speaking. And I'll reinforce it. I'll keep repeating that you didn't leave forever. His voice cracked a little. Thank you, I just got here. I don't want to ruin everything. Daisy set the towel aside and sat beside him, fully. The closeness brought warmth. Easton, you're doing the best you can, she said gently. Staying here forever was never going to be simple. Life is complicated. What matters is that you keep your word and you come back. Gratitude rose in him like a wave. I will. If it's only a week, I can do it. And hopefully, I'll close the deal fast. That night, he called Emma and Everly into the living room. Daisy stayed nearby. Emma's lip trembled when she heard he had to travel, but her face brightened when he explained he'd be back soon, and maybe he'd bring something special from the city. Everly only nodded quietly, clutching her stuffed puppy, sadness sitting still in her eyes. You promise you'll come back? Emma insisted, fists clenched. Easton stroked her cheek, heart tight. I promise, sweetheart. I'm coming back. Later, he tucked them in and read the astronaut dinosaur story again. Everly gripped his shirt and wouldn't let go until he soothed her with soft words. Daisy watched with a tender smile, though worry still lingered in her eyes. The next morning, Easton packed a small suitcase in the motel room, his heart heavy. Daisy arrived with the twins so they could say goodbye before the airport. Emma ran to him. Everly came more slowly. He knelt and hugged them tight. Be good for Mommy. I'll call every day, and I'll be back before you even realize it. Emma nodded and handed him a crayon drawing. 2 stick-figure girls, a tall man labeled Easton, and a smiling woman labeled Mommy, under a big yellow sun. Everly stepped in for a quiet hug, gripping his shirt like it was a lifeline. When they pulled back, Daisy moved closer, eyes shining. Just remember, we're here waiting, she whispered. Don't let them keep you longer than necessary. Easton touched her face in a quick, tender gesture. I won't. Then, loud enough for the girls to hear, he added, I'm coming home, to you. Daisy nodded, swallowing the knot in her throat. Travel safe. The drive to the airport was a slow ache in his chest. With every mile, Easton thought about the girls and Daisy's trust. At the gate, surrounded by hurried executives, he realized how foreign that world already felt. Airports used to be his second home. Now everything sounded hollow. When the plane took off and the city lights shrank below, he closed his eyes. The next few days would decide the future of the company, and in a way the future of this new family too. But this time, he wasn't fighting for bonuses or prestige. He was fighting for bedtime stories, for laughter in that small house, for the light in 2 little girls' eyes when he walked back through the door. That was the commitment he carried through the clouds. The trip back to the city was just as turbulent as he feared. The moment he stepped off the plane, Anxious assistants ushered him straight into a black sedan headed for headquarters. Every hallway seemed to pulse with tension, whispers trailing behind him, whether he would stay or disappear again. He squared his shoulders. The goal was clear. Close the deal with the Omega Group as quickly as possible and go back home. That afternoon, he walked into the conference room to face Omega's representatives. Powerful executives, flawless suits, cold eyes. They didn't hide their distrust toward a CEO who had been absent for months. Easton, now driven by something bigger than ambition, threw himself into the negotiations with renewed force. His old skills shined, but behind every argument, one thought guided him. Let me close this deal and get back to my daughters. Days turned into nights of spreadsheets, calls, and contracts. In the few breaks he had, he hid in his office, now strange and cold, without Emma's laughter, without Everly's shy little presence, without Daisy's calm. Whenever he could, he called home. Emma talked non-stop about toys and preschool stories. Everly said only a few words, but her whisper alone was enough to break his heart. And Daisy, tired but steady, always ended with the same line, "Don't forget us." "Never," he would answer with absolute conviction. On the fifth day, the deal was almost closed, only a few crucial details left. The tension in the company was nearly tangible. Success would mean Easton's redemption. Failure would be the beginning of the end. As they adjusted the final points of the contract, his phone vibrated. It was Daisy. "Easton," her voice came out shaky. "It's Everly." She slipped on the porch steps and cut her chin. "We're heading to urgent care. I think she'll need stitches." Cold rushed through his body. "Is it serious? Is she badly hurt?" "She's scared. She bled a little, but I think she'll be okay." Daisy's voice faltered. "I'm alone with her. Emma's with the neighbor. I'm coming. Now." "But the deal?" She tried. "I said I'm coming." He cut in, decisive. "Send me the clinic address. I'll get there as fast as I can." He hung up and took a slow breath, his chest full of panic and love. Out in the hallway, Stanton appeared, irritated. "We're about to finalize. Where do you think you're going?" "My daughter is hurt," Easton said firmly. "She needs me." Stanton's eyes narrowed. "If you walk out now, you risk losing everything." "If I stay, I lose a lot more," Easton shot back, already moving down the corridor. He stepped into the conference room, only long enough to say, "I've given everything I can to these negotiations. What's left is minimal. Close the deal today. If you need my signature, email it. I'm taking care of my family." And he left without looking back. The next hours blurred together. A night flight, a frantic drive from the airport to urgent care, his heart lodged in his throat. When he arrived at the clinic, nearly dawn, he saw Daisy in the waiting room with Everly in her lap, pale, a white bandage on her chin. Daisy looked up, relief, shock, and emotion all tangled together. You really came?" Easton dropped to his knees in front of them, gently brushing Everly's hair back. "Of course I came." Everly opened her eyes slowly, recognizing him. She let out a small sob and reached for him. He pulled her close carefully, afraid of squeezing too tight. "It hurt," Everly whispered. "Mummy got scared." "I know, sweetheart. You were so brave." His voice broke. "I'm here now." A nurse came over with instructions. Daisy listened, exhausted. Easton wrapped an arm around her shoulders, steadying her. "I've got you," he murmured. "For real." And in that moment, Daisy believed him. A little later, in the hush of early morning, they went home. Daisy pulled up in front of the duplex carrying Everly, already asleep. Emma, who'd stayed with the neighbor, ran outside in her pajamas, eyes wide. "Is Everly okay?" she asked, hugging Easton's leg. "She's going to be fine, champ," he promised, guiding them inside. In the small living room, the family gathered, Daisy holding Everly, Emma pressed against her. Easton crouched in front of them like a protective circle. "I didn't expect you to drop everything," Daisy admitted softly. "That deal was important, wasn't it?" Easton let his breath out slowly. "Nothing is more important than you and the girls. I told them to finish the negotiation without me. And if they can't," she pressed, tears in her eyes. "What if they need you?" He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, solid. "Then the deal falls apart, and if that's what happens, so be it. I'm not letting work run my life again. I was gone too long. I'm not making that mistake twice." They let Everly sleep on the couch so they could keep an eye on her. Emma curled up beside her sister and refused to move. Easton covered both girls with a blanket, his chest tight with tenderness at the sight of them. Safe, loved, together. In the days that followed, a message came from the CFO. The Omega Group deal had been successfully closed. The final step had been completed by the interim president and another executive. Easton's absence hadn't ruined anything. Relief washed through him. Maybe the board would finally accept that he could lead without being physically present every day. Still, another video meeting was scheduled. When the CFO appeared on the screen, Easton braced for criticism. Instead, he heard a tired laugh. "I'll admit it, Easton. We expected a disaster when you walked out mid-negotiation, but the team handled it. Maybe you were right about delegating." "So the board isn't asking for my resignation?" Easton asked. "Not now," the CFO replied. "The partner is satisfied, investors exhaled, the deal is done. But they want clarity, no limbo. We need a formal plan for how you're balancing the role and your family." Easton nodded. "I'll prepare it, but the plan includes me staying here most of the time. I'll only travel when absolutely necessary. If they accept that, we move forward." When the call ended, relief came in waves. The future was still uncertain, but for now, the company and fatherhood could coexist. He found Daisy in the girl's bedroom, changing Everly's bandage. She looked up, tense. "So?" Easton gently moved Everly's curious little hand away from the stitches. They pulled it off. Nothing collapsed. "The board will keep this new arrangement, for now." A shy smile appeared on Daisy's face. Everly tugged on his sleeve, voice small. "You're staying?" Easton's heart clenched. "I am, sweetheart. I'm staying." From the hallway, Emma broke into a huge grin. "Yay! Now you can fix my bike!" Daisy laughed. "She's been waiting for you to keep that promise." Easton ruffled Emma's hair. "We'll figure it out." That afternoon, they all gathered out front. They dug through an old toolbox. Emma proudly showed the loose chain. Everly watched from a chair, fresh bandage on her chin. With trial and error and a few phone tutorials, Easton got the chain back on and tightened the bolts. Emma's happy shrieks and Everly's shy little smile were worth more than any $1 million contract. When the sun set, painting the sky golden pink, Easton and Daisy stood on the porch. Inside, the girls laughed while coloring in a new book. Daisy leaned against the doorway, exhausted but calm. "I never imagined life could be like this," she confessed. "I always thought I'd be alone, just fighting to survive. Now, it's not perfect, but it's ours." Easton stepped closer until their shoulders touched. "It's more perfect than I ever dreamed." He drew a breath. "We still haven't really talked about the future. I need to decide a permanent arrangement with the board, maybe splitting my time between here and the city, or something else. I don't want to disrupt your life, or theirs." Daisy met his eyes, the dusk reflected in them. "Maybe someday we find a house here that fits all of us. More space, a room for each girl. But that's not urgent. Right now, we have today. We have each other. That's what we build from." Her words settled him. One day at a time. That was all he needed to hear. Then a shout from inside. "Easton, come see!" Emma called. "Look what we drew." He laughed, sharing a quick look with Daisy. "Duty calls." They walked in together. The girls held up a sheet of paper proudly. 4 smiling stick figures, names underneath. Mom, Emma, Everly, and Dad. Dad. The air left Easton's chest. The word he'd hoped for but never dared to ask for was right there in crayon. Real. Daisy reached for his hand. He squeezed back, eyes burning. "It's perfect," he whispered. "I love it." Their smiles lit up the room. Later, after the girls were asleep, the two of them sat in the living room, in a silence filled with promises. Daisy leaned against him, tired but glowing. "You know," she teased softly, "the next step is giving goodnight kisses as daddy. They're not letting you off the hook now." Easton pulled her into a gentle embrace. "I don't ever want to be let off the hook." Outside, crickets sang in the moonlit yard. The future still wasn't written, full of challenges, travel, meetings, school pickups, rushed dinners. But in that small house, with 2 girls sleeping peacefully, they had a family. And for Easton and Daisy, no power, no money, no title in the world could ever be more valuable than that. Wow. If you stayed until the end, you deserve my tightest hug. Thank you for living this story with us. If this journey moved you, hit like. It helps our channel more than you know. Now tell me in the comments, would you have the courage to trust love again, one with twists, second chances, and real scars? Or do you think Daisy should slow down with Easton? I want your honest opinion. And yes, I read every single comment. And don't forget to share this with someone who loves comeback stories, because it truly makes a difference. And now, click the next story on your screen. There's another wave of emotion waiting for you here on Hearts Rewritten.